high within the Peruvian Andes, shrouded in mist and silence, stands a city of stone that simply should not exist. It balances precariously on a granite ridge, surrounded by sheer cliffs that drop thousands of feet into the raging Urubamba River below. For centuries, this place remained invisible to the outside world, a ghost town swallowed by the jungle, known only to a few locals and hidden from the Spanish conquistadors who ravaged the continent. But why? Why would a civilization without the wheel, without iron tools, and without a written language drag thousands of tons of rock up a jagged mountain spine to build a palace in the clouds? And even more hauntingly, why did they abandon this masterpiece less than 100 years after it was begun? Today, we are going to peel back the layers of vegetation and history to reveal the human cost of this construction, the genius of the engineers who defied gravity, and the tragic collapse of the empire that left it behind. By the end of this film, you will understand not just how Machu Picchu was built, but why it stands as a final defiant memory of the Inca. To understand the city, we must first understand the moment of its discovery, a moment that changed archaeology forever. It was July 24th, 1911, when an American historian named Hiram Bingham stumbled up a steep, jungle-choked slope. He was not looking for Machu Picchu. He was hunting for Vilcabamba, the last stronghold where the Inca emperors fought a desperate guerrilla war against the Spanish invaders. Guided by a local farmer named Melchor Arrega and accompanied by a small police sergeant, Bingham pushed through the dense undergrowth and suddenly found himself facing walls of white granite, perfectly cut and untouched by the centuries. He believed he had found the lost city of the Incas, a title that stuck for decades, though history would later correct him. This was not a fortress of war, but something far more complex, a site that had been sleeping quietly while empires rose and fell around it. But who were the people capable of such grandeur? The Inca called their empire Tawantinsuyu, the realm of the four parts. In the span of barely a century, they exploded from a small tribe in the Cusco Valley to become the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas, stretching from modern-day Colombia down to Chile. They were masters of organization. Without a currency or a market economy, they built a civilization on the concept of MITA, a mandatory public service tax. It was this labor force, composed of thousands of men drawn from conquered territories, that made the impossible architecture of Machu Picchu reality. They did not work for money. They worked for the Sapa Inca, the son of the sun, in exchange for protection, food, and clothes. The construction of Machu Picchu, likely ordered by the great Emperor Pachacuti around 1450, was an engineering nightmare. The site sits on top of two fault lines. This sounds like a mistake, but for the Inca, it was a strategic choice. The fractured rock provided the raw materials right on the summit, meaning they didn't have to haul the giant stones up from the river valley. But how did they shape them? Without iron or steel, they used stones harder than granite, pounding the rock into submission. They perfected the technique of ashlar masonry, cutting blocks so precisely that they locked together without a drop of mortar. You cannot fit a knife blade between them today. This dry stone technique gave the walls flexibility. When earthquakes shook the Andes, the stones would dance in place and settle back down, whereas rigid mortar would have cracked and crumbled. Yet, the greatest engineering feat at Machu Picchu is not the walls you see, but the foundation you don't. The region receives roughly 80 inches of rain a year. On a steep ridge, this should have caused landslides that washed the city away within a decade. To prevent this, the Inca engineers spent roughly 60% of their effort underground. They built deep foundations of layered rock and gravel to drain the water away, and they constructed hundreds of agricultural terraces that stepped down the mountainside. These terraces were not just for farming corn and potatoes to feed the royal court. They were massive retaining walls that stabilized the mountain, acting as a buttress against erosion. They literally sculpted the mountain to ensure their city would last forever. But to truly comprehend the miracle of Machu Picchu, we must look beyond its walls to the lifeline that connected it to the world. A city in the clouds cannot survive in isolation. It was merely one node in a vast, pulsating nervous system known as the Capac Nan, the Royal Road. Stretching over 25,000 miles, this network was the greatest engineering feat of the Americas, rivaling the famous Roman roads of Europe. Without iron tools or the wheel, Inca engineers cut trails through living rock, built suspension bridges woven from grass across terrifying gorges, and laid staircases that climbed into thin air of the high Andes. It was along the spine that the lifeblood of the empire flowed. Messages traveled at the speed of running feet. The chasquis, the empire's relay runners, stationed in huts every few miles, could carry a message from a capital in Cusco to the farthest borders in mere days. They ran fresh fish from the coast of the emperor's table in the mountains before it could spoil, a logistical triumph that held the sprawling empire together. While the roads brought people to the city, it was the mastery of water that allowed them to stay. Ascending back to the citadel, we find a hidden masterpiece of hydraulic engineering. On a mountain ridge, water is scarce, and yet the Inca built 16 fountains that cascade through the city, providing a continuous flow of fresh spring water. They located a natural spring on the steep northern slope, kilometers away, and built a canal strictly graded at a 3% incline to control the velocity of the water. Too steep, and the water would erode the stone. Too flat, and it would stagnate. The water arrives first at the emperor's residence, a deliberate symbol of his status, before flowing down to the priests and then the common workers. Even today, after 5 centuries of abandonment and earthquakes, water still flows through these channels, a ghostly reminder of the engineers who valued utility and beauty in equal measure. Life within these stone walls was a regimented balance of labor and ritual. The terraces that stepped down the mountainside were not merely structural. They were an agricultural laboratory. The Inca understood microclimates. By varying the elevation of the terraces, they could simulate different growing zones. The stone walls absorbed the heat of the sun during the day and released it at night, preventing the frost from killing the crops. Here, they experimented with countless varieties of corn and potatoes, adapting species from the jungle to thrive in a high altitude. This was not just subsistence farming. It was state-sponsored science. The food grown here, along with imports brought up from the Amazon via the road network, supported a population of perhaps 700 to 1,000 people at its peak. A mix of royalty, religious attendants, and the Anaconas, the skilled servants who maintained this state. As the sun set over the Urubamba Valley, the city turned its eyes to the heavens. For the Inca, the sky was not separate from the earth. It was a reflection of it. They did not just see constellations made of stars. They saw constellations made of the dark spaces between the stars, the dark cloud constellations. They saw a llama, a toad, and a serpent in the black ribbons of the Milky Way, which they believed was a celestial river, Miu, the counterpart to the river roaring far below. The layout of Machu Picchu mirrors this cosmology. The famous Inhuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, is a ritual stone aligned perfectly with the sun during the winter solstice. The Inca believed they could tie the sun to the rock to prevent it from straying too far north, ensuring the return of light and warmth. To stand in the center of the plaza was to stand at the axis of the universe, where the earth, the sky, and the underworld intersected. However, this golden age was destined to be short-lived. The fall of Machu Picchu is as mysterious as its construction, but it wasn't destroyed by cannon fire or trampled by cavalry. It simply withered away. In the early 16th century, before the Spanish soldiers even set foot in the region, invisible assassins arrived first. Smallpox and measles. These European diseases raced down the trade routes from Central America, decimating the Inca population and killing the Emperor Huayna Capac. His death triggered a brutal civil war between his sons, Atahualpa and Huáscar, which tore the empire apart just as the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro arrived on the coast. In the chaos that followed, the social order that supported Machu Picchu collapsed. The MITA labor system broke down. The supply lines from Cusco were cut. The state was likely abandoned around 1572, as the last resistance of the Inca was crushed. But here lies the twist of fate. Because Machu Picchu was not a strategic military target and was hidden so effectively by the geography, the Spanish never found it. They burned and dismantled Inca temples across the Andes to build their churches. But Machu Picchu remained untouched, gradually reclaimed by the cloud forest. It slept in the mist, preserving the pure, unadulterated vision of the Inca world, while the rest of the empire was systematically dismantled. To fully grasp the sanctity of Machu Picchu, one must step inside its most hallowed chambers, where stone and spirit merge. Among the hundreds of structures, the Temple of the Sun stands unique. It is the only building with a curved wall, a semicircular tower built upon a massive natural rock that serves as an altar. The stonework here is the finest in the entire complex, polished to a glass-like smoothness. Beneath this tower lies a natural cave, carved and shaped into what Bingham named the Royal Tomb. While no mummies were found inside, likely removed by the Inca before they fled, the design suggests this was a place for the ancestors. In the Inca worldview, the dead were not gone. They were active participants in the lives of the living, consulted during harvest and war. This tower connects the underworld of the ancestors with the sky of the sun god Inti, a physical axis connecting the realms of existence. Just a short walk away lies a darker, more enigmatic structure, the Temple of the Condor. Here, the Inca utilized a natural rock formation shaped like massive, outstretched wings. On the ground before it, they carved the stone into the head and beak of a condor, complete with a white ruff. The Andean condor was not merely a bird. It was a messenger to the gods, the only creature capable of flying between the earthly realm and the divine upper world. Historians believe this temple may have been a site of sacrifice or justice, a place where offerings were made to ensure the balance of the world. The integration of the living rock with the carved stone is so seamless that it is difficult to tell where nature ends and human artistry begins, a philosophy that defines every inch of the citadel. But Machu Picchu was not just a city of stone and male warriors. It was also a sanctuary for the Akla, the chosen women or virgins of the sun. For a long time, early excavations suggested that the skeletal remains at the site were almost entirely female, leading to the romantic but incorrect theory that this was a sanctuary solely for these holy women. Modern science has corrected this count to a more balanced mix of men and women. Yet the presence of the Akla remains a crucial part of the story. These women were selected from across the empire for their beauty and talent. They lived in seclusion, weaving the finest textiles, which the Inca valued more than gold, and brewing the sacred chicha corn beer used in rituals. Their presence confirms that Machu Picchu was a functioning ceremonial center, a place where the empire's most valuable commodities, cloth and ritual, were produced in service to the emperor. This immense effort of construction and ritual maintenance required a society of absolute discipline. The Inca lived by a simple moral code: AMA SUA, AMA Lulla, AMA Kella, do not steal, do not lie, do not be lazy. In a society without money, labor was a currency, and laziness was a crime against the state. But this severity was balanced by a system of reciprocity. When a region was hit by drought, the state's storehouses, filled during the good years, were open to feed the people. This social contract created a loyalty so fierce that even as the Spanish toppled the emperor, the resistance continued for decades. The workers who built Machu Picchu believed they were building not just a retreat for a king, but a home for a god, and in doing so, ensuring the stability of the entire universe. We must also consider the silence that fell over these mountains for 300 years. When the Spanish arrived, they hunted tirelessly for gold. They melted down the grand golden disk of the Sun Temple in Cusco. They stripped the walls of their precious metals. Yet, they never found Machu Picchu. Why? Perhaps the locals who knew of its existence kept the secret to protect the sacred site, or perhaps the jungle simply moved too fast. Within a generation of abandonment, the roads were swallowed by vines. The bridges rotted away. The city became a legend, whispered about in the valleys but unseen. It sat perfectly preserved, a time capsule waiting for the moment when the world was ready to understand its value. It was this accidental preservation that allows us today to see the Inca Empire not as it was destroyed, but as it was at its absolute zenith. Today, millions of footsteps were down the paths where the Sapa Inca once walked in sandals of woven fiber. We come with our cameras and our questions, looking for a connection to a past we can barely comprehend. We worry about the preservation of the site, arguing over how to protect it from a very love the world now bears for it. Yet, the stones remain indifferent. They have outlasted the empire that placed them, the conquistadors who missed them, and the centuries of solitude that embraced them. Machu Picchu is more than a ruin. It is a challenge. It challenges our modern assumption that technology requires steel and plastic. It proves that with organization, shared purpose, and a deep respect for the natural world, humanity can build monuments that do not just conquer the landscape, but become a part of it. The story of the Inca is a tragedy, but their legacy in stone is a triumph that belongs to all of humanity. Thank you for joining me on this journey to the lost city in the clouds. There's so much more to this history than one video can contain. If you found the story of the Inca and their lost city fascinating, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. I want to hear from you in the comments below. If you could travel back to the height of the Inca Empire, would you choose to be a generic worker secure in the welfare of the state or a runner on the royal road seeing the edges of the world? Let me know your choice in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring.